They can see you, but they cannot be seen by you.
My unit in the US Army was deployed to Iraq in April of 2006. We were in Ramadi. It was 123 kilometers, 77 miles, out of Baghdad. I was in a Humvee, headed to Baghdad for emergency leave due to a death in my family. It was close to midnight. The Humvee I was in with 3 others and a turret gunner. The 2 other Humvee, the same 5 total people. 1 in front, 1 in back. I was without a weapon due to my leave. The Humvee in front stopped hard. We all figured it was a possible IED or VBIED. The team leader in our Humvee radioed to the lead Humvee. The convo went along these lines. From this point forward, Humvee will be called HV. HV1. Something flew in front of the HV. HV2. What? Flew in front of the HV? HV1. Yes. HV2. We didn't see anything. And the third HV piped in. Does anyone hear the hello? HV1. Yes. HV2. Our HV. Yes, but I don't see it. Did the other 2 vehicles? Just then, in the desert off the highway was a black figure. It looked like a huge bird. It looked like smoke was emitting from it. A blackish, greenish smoke with a bit of a blue tinge. We all focused our eyes. The 2 troops with better NODs, night vision, could see something but couldn't make out what it was. The smoke was distorting the view. Within a second or 2, a rock was thrown at one of the HV. A big rock, like the size of a head. We all froze. Due to the rules of engagement, we couldn't just light it up. We used a spotlight, and in that light, something flew straight up, and then we heard a loud screeching noise. Within a minute, it was over. We all sat there in a state of shock, curiosity, and panic. When we got to Baghdad, the translator that they were picking up to bring to the Marines that were with us, he said, "Sounds like you encountered an Ifrit." Team leader said, "A what?" "Ifrit, a winged djinn." We were all a bit speechless. We chose not to disclose to our command about the winged thing, as battle fatigue, now known as PTSD, was a career killer at this juncture. It's been 13 years since this happened. I met my now husband in 2015, and he had also been deployed to Ramadi with my sister unit at the time, and he went through this particular stretch of highway on his mid-deployment leave. He recounted a similar story to me. It was enough to stop me in my tracks. It was pretty close to mine, except they didn't stop, they just boogied on through. Considering the time they were there was very deadly, including an aid station manned by soldiers that was ambushed and blown to bits. I was a medic, so death was my norm. I still can't wrap my mind around it. And now apparently the last 2 places I lived in, something has followed us. My uncle's a Navy engineer captain, but was an engineer with the Army for 3 years before that. During that time, he was deployed to Iraq. It's not a time that he likes to talk about because it was, as he put it, some of the most disturbing time in his life. Me and him never really talked, mostly because he is very much a Catholic who thinks my more pagan beliefs and theories are strange. Also due to my dislike of the military structure as a whole. Don't get me wrong, I respect soldiers, not the system they are serving under. But a while ago, he gave me permission to talk about this because he was curious about my take on it. In his first deployment, he was serving at a base where they would deploy drones from frequently. One night, reports came in of large enemy movement into a very close by abandoned mosque, so they deployed a bomber that obliterated the building. The next day, an elderly man showed up at the base. demanding to be told why the mosque was destroyed. The man was frantic and enraged, apparently having come several miles just to come to the base. He had worked at the mosque as a young man and claimed it wasn't primarily a mosque but a prison. They couldn't get much out of him about what he meant, so he was sent away. The following weeks became strange. Apparently the mosque could be seen from the eastern wall, and there were frequent reports of figures standing on the rubble, just watching. Attempts to investigate went even stranger. The site captain, or something, ordered a squad of volunteers to camp out there and find out who it was. My uncle volunteered. The night he and 3 others waited all night, with nothing until midnight, when the body of a vulture dropped on their tent. When they went exploring, one of the other soldiers was pounced on by a figure who, the soldier said, stunk like rotting stuff and had breath like the blast from an oven right after you open it. After that, other things started happening. Those shadowy figures moved closer. Random bushfires would start out of nowhere. Vehicles would be found covered in hand and footprints made of ash and dust. Patrols at night would report being followed by something along the wall. Trails of strange footprints, and even stories of something my uncle could only describe as a hellhound that would chase people. The base commander thought the old man from before had to be involved, so they went to the town and looked for him. Supposedly, the man was far more friendly and helpful, especially after they told him what was happening. Apparently, a long time ago, the area was plagued by numerous jinn. The mosque was built by a group of men who began imprisoning any jinn, even, as the man reported, hin or vin, an animal-like jinn. He said in the basement was where they stored them, and as far as he knew, there were at least 50 of them, not including the room where only senior members of the mosque were permitted to enter. Apparently the men who owned it either passed away or left, and so it fell into disrepair and disuse. What happened from there, he's declined to tell me until I get him something. Beyond my own interest in paranormal in general, this was the first time he and I had had much of a conversation, much less a revelation of this magnitude. So what do you all think? I heard a lot from Iraq and Afghanistan about encounters with the fiery jinn. But first, I'd like others' stories about jinn to help him understand that he ain't the only one to have encountered these. And does anyone think it's a coincidence that the rise of jinn sightings has occurred alongside this war? Anyway, thanks for listening and for your opinions and stories. The Jinn explained. Muslim here. I keep seeing comments from people asking what jinn are, so I decided to write a concise post. This isn't a comprehensive post, but the intent is to shed some light on an otherwise confusing topic. We refer to what Christians call demons as jinn. They are one of the 3 intelligent creations of God, the other 2 being humans and angels. The jinn were created from smokeless fire. Some suspect this means electricity or other electromagnetic property. Humans were created from clay, carbon and water, angels from light or photons. Humans and jinn enjoy the right to free will, but angels are restricted to the obedience of God. Some jinn are good, some are pure evil, but most are kind of in the middle. In Arabic, the evil ones are called shayateen, which is plural, or shaitan, singular. So in English, jinn translates to demons. Shaitan translates to Satan or devil. Iblis, Lucifer, is important to the story of the jinn because he leads all of the purely evil shayateen. He was not the original jinn, but he was the best in worship of God from the jinn, and he held a high position due to his devotion. However, when God announced the creation of Adam as his best creation, he grew jealous and arrogant. He felt man was an inferior creation, and that his worship of God for thousands of years was evidence of that. God, being the creator of everyone and everything, told Iblis that he had transgressed all limits and would be sent to hell. He asked for a reprieve before his sentence so that he could prove himself how easily he can cause mankind to be led off the path of worship of God. God granted it to him. The forbidden apple was bit. Adam and Eve were sent to earth. You know the story, and so here we are. So back to the jinn. They existed far before humanity ever arrived on earth, and they were great in numbers, but alas, they couldn't get along and had great wars amongst each other. This caused all kinds of destruction to earth, and as a consequence, their populations dwindled and humanity flourished. They ended up establishing small tribes across the remoter regions of earth. As already mentioned, not all jinn or demons are necessarily evil. They practice many of the same faiths practiced by humans. They have organized societies where they dole out justice. This is one of the reasons why they rarely kill humans. There are severe repercussions, including capital punishment. When you do have a problem with them, call on God for protection. No matter what faith the jinn practices, it will back off. This is confirmed by exorcists of many faiths. Among their tribes, they have different levels of powers. Some can fly, while others can shapeshift, imitate human voices, and some of the more powerful ones, called ifrit, are able to travel at the speed of light. Most, if not all, the paranormal phenomenon we read about, ghosts, UAP phenomenon, orbs, spirits, skinwalkers, fae, dogmen, wendigo, Sasquatch, Muslims for the most part consider them all to be some form or another of jinn. Other tidbits about jinn. There are several classes of jinn, each with their own degrees of indifference or hostility towards humans. They cannot be seen in their original form. Whatever we see is whatever form they've taken on, the form they want us to see. One of the more common types of jinn, called jinn, takes on the shape of a snake, black wolf-like creatures, or other animals. Some of them are thought to consume bones, feces, or rotting flesh for sustenance. It's suspected that this is the reason for the foul odor experienced by people when they encounter or feel the presence of them. There is a misconception that you hear often about how jinn reside in the Middle East or Eastern Hemisphere. They're everywhere. Again, they simply go by different names, depending on the culture. They are reclusive and territorial creatures, and prefer to be left alone. They're likely to live in remote regions like forests, deserts, and oceans. You can even find them in uninhabited attics, caves, or burrows. Another place they dwell in are bathrooms. Remember that feces bit? If you encroach on their territory, you'll run into problems. They most likely tend to be mischievous in nature and enjoy spooking humans to get them to leave their dwellings. Some of the truly evil ones will scratch humans or possess them, but the most rare and dangerous ones are called ghouls. They'll cause humans to get lost in deserts or forests, leading to their deaths. Possible missing 411 explanation? Muslims believe that the witches use certain types of jinn to do seemingly miraculous or malevolent activity for their bidding. During the era of Prophet Solomon, witchcraft and magic had become rampant among his civilization, so much so that it became a real nightmare for his people. So to solve this, a covenant was made by him and leaders of the jinn that they will not interfere with the affairs of mankind. Despite that, there's some who will not heed the terms of that agreement. Oftentimes will remind the offending jinn of the agreement made with them. Muslim scholars will advise to exhaust all natural explanations before performing exorcisms or cleansing of a home. Do not use violence against them, as that can give them a reason to do the same to you. Always invoke or call on God to protect you from any kind of interaction with them. I was a sergeant in the US Army and ETSing, getting out, from the military when President Bush ordered more troops into Iraq in 2003. I had just returned home to Austin, Texas, when I was summoned into my local National Guard unit at Camp Maybury and told that I was being recalled to the army, but the unit was already tasked out to deploy to Iraq. I was not part of their unit yet, so the commander offered to give me a waiver to deploy with a government contractor, Halliburton, in Houston. I knew that I would make more money as a contractor, so I took the offer. Not long after arriving at Kuwait at Camp Doha, I began working with the operations team, overseeing logistics affairs. We would oversee the daily convoy of supply between Kuwait and Baghdad, a route riddled with IED incidents, small arms skirmishes, and almost constant breakdowns of army and civilian vehicles. Because I was an SAW gunner in the 1st Infantry Division while in active duty, I was technically still in the Guard. I was often on the convoys, manning a mounted weapon that accompanied the mostly civilian convoys. During these runs, we had a few strange encounters in an area south of Baghdad, known then as Camp Babylon, occupied by French troops but then designated as an archaeological site for obvious reasons. Camp Babylon was set up in the area that was said to originally be inhabited by the famous Tower of Babel. Indeed, there were ruins there that did look like a massive structure once stood at that spot. I had 2 strange incidents happen to me while passing through there. The first incident seems a bit benign, but sets the mood for the second. We were passing through Camp Babylon in the afternoon one day when our convoy took small arms fire. The SOP at the time, standard operating procedure, was to stop the convoy and return fire. This was because in the past, such incidents ended up being a lone gunman attempting to scare the convoy into running into IEDs on the road. Because of this, the SOP changed to stop the convoy, dismount, and return fire. While engineers looked for explosive devices on the road, we scanned the horizon for the enemy. Nothing. They most likely fled immediately. However, the ruins around Camp Babylon were alive with shadow figures that seemed to move about the area. Several times we would spot the figures, but they would immediately disappear. A contractor lying beside me with his weapon commented how odd that we are in the shadow of Babel and fighting the supernatural. I didn't respond, but knew he was a 32nd degree Mason who was really into the arcane aspects of Babylon, etc. I didn't feel at the time that much was supernatural, but certainly did see the shadowy and bizarrely small figures dart about the structures. Once the road was deemed clear, we continued on to Baghdad. The second incident occurred about a month later. At this point, the weather in southern Iraq and Kuwait had turned quite cold at night. During this encounter, we had just completed the supply run to Baghdad and were returning back to Camp Doha in Kuwait when a vehicle in our convoy broke down. Once again, we found ourselves right at Camp Babylon. While the army mechanics took a look at the vehicle and the rest of us took up fighting positions around the area, strange things began to occur. It started with a strange light bobbing in the desert. Thinking it was a person with a flashlight, we used NVG's night vision goggles to watch. It was simply a glowing ball of light moving towards the set of ruins. After initial contact with the light, a few of us had moved forward away from the convoy to see what the source was. After seeing it was self-contained and not a person, we were a bit alarmed. Then we heard a sound that I will never forget. A long wailing began from one of the ruined structures not far away. It sounded like a woman in agony mixed with loneliness. On and on the sounds went while we huddled in the cold and dark, wondering what the hell we were listening to. With our NVGs equipped, we used our flashlights to spotlight the ruins. If you've ever done this, you will know that a normal flashlight with NVGs looks like a massive beam of light. We scoured the area, but no source of the whales or the ball of light was seen. About this time, we were told via radio that the vehicle was repaired and ready to roll, so we decided to return to the convoy. I was slinging my SAW over my shoulder when I noticed my contractor partner was staring at the ruins in horror. He was frozen. I shook him and he snapped out of his stupor, quickly leaving the area with the rest of us. Once we were back at the camp, and it was pleasantly daylight the following morning, several of us were chatting about the encounter at Camp Babylon before our daily operations briefing. It was then that I remembered the terrified expression on the face of the contractor. So I asked him about it. He was still obviously traumatized by the event, but managed to explain that as we were leaving our position on the sandy hill, he saw a tall, black figure standing beside the ruins. It was watching us as we were looking for him, her, or it. He said that he felt an instant wave of despair hit him and thought that he was going to die. He didn't remember leaving the area. His next memory was in the Humvee, headed back to Kuwait. I now write non-fiction books about haunted places for Llewellyn Publishing and have visited hundreds of reputedly haunted spots. But I'll never forget the wailing figure at the ruins of Babel. It's also worth noting that when I related this story to some of our Pakistani employees at Camp Doha and Camp Arifjan, they also were quite horrified. One of them, a translator we called Adi, said that we had encountered a djinn, or a damned spirit, and that we were lucky to be able to tell the tale. I agree. I'm a journalist living in Turkey. Paranormal investigations are my hobby. I did not experience this story. It happened to one of my readers who sent it to me to publish. Here's the story. I live in a village in Zonguldak. My name is Dilaver. When I was a kid, the women in my village usually gathered in a house at night and told horror stories about jinns. Thus, they unnecessarily scared themselves. Since I was a kid, I used to go to these meetings with my mother, listen to the stories and be influenced by them. Our village is an old mountain village which is neglected and secluded. The entire village is on a slope. There is no single flat road. There's no lighting in the streets either. But there is a mill at the entrance of the village. My mother and her friends used to go to the mill in the morning and make cornmeal until the evening. There were cherry laurel and fig trees around the mill. One day, I went to the mill with my mother. The day had not dawned yet, and it could be considered night. We put sacks of corn in the mill to grind and make flour. I had to pee, and the mill did not have any toilets. I went to pee under a fig tree. After I peed, I went back to the mill again. While I was working in the mill, my mother told me, "I will go to the house and come back soon. Do not go anywhere." I don't know if it's psychological, but once I was alone, I started to hear someone calling me by saying,
"Hey! Hey!"
I panicked when the door of the mill suddenly opened. I went out of the mill to check whether there was someone outside. Once I got out, I think I saw someone under the fig tree. The light of the mill was not lighting that area much. Maybe this was because I believed the shade I saw was looking at me. Suddenly I thought, I hope that is not a djinn. I shuddered with this thought. I went back into the mill and closed the door. However, it opened again. I panicked when the door suddenly and harshly opened again. I didn't know what to do. Instinctively, I wanted to get out and run as fast as I could. When I got out to do this, I saw dozens of shades around the mill and in front of me. I went back in, entered the mill and sat down. I started to say prayers I remember while crying. I lost myself with fear. During this time, my mother arrived and took me home. I bruised the arms of my mother with my nails. However, I didn't even realize it. When I returned to normal at home, my mother, father, and other members of my family asked me what happened and why I was so scared. I couldn't tell what I saw to anyone, just because I may feel the same fear again while telling it. In the following days, I wanted to forget the shades I had seen, but my nightmares didn't allow me to do so. In my nightmares, someone was constantly trying to strangle me. These dreams were so real that I usually woke up out of breath. I had these nightmares every night when I went to bed, without ablution. My family, who noticed that I lost mentally, took me to the imam of the village mosque. They told him about me. However, the imam didn't see any problems in me. He told me that I'm okay and the problems I suffer could be psychological. However, I was not crazy. My family thought mosque imams might not understand such things, so they took me to another Hodja. This Hodja was experienced in jinn haunting and reversing spells. This Hodja put a bowl of water in front of me when we went to meet him, and he said, "Now look at this water carefully. If you see something in the water, tell me what you see." I swear, I saw the ones who strangled me. I told what I saw to the Hodja. I answered the questions of the Hodja. In the end, the Hodja gave me a vefk. He said, "You have to carry this vefk on you. Jinns cannot approach you as long as you carry this, and they cannot harm you. However, if you take it off or lose it, they will haunt you, and they can even kill you." I've been wearing that vefk for years as a necklace. After that day, I had no problems with jinns. The problem is, I lost that vefk a few days ago. I don't know what to do. Here are a couple of explanations of some of the themes in the story that you might not be familiar with. 1. According to some common Turkish popular beliefs, the surrounding of the fig trees are one of the places where there are many jinns. Therefore, people often avoid getting close to fig trees, especially in the evening. It is believed that peeing under the fig tree causes jinns to haunt the person. According to a linked belief, people who will fall down from a fig tree will certainly be disabled or die soon. 2. Vefk. It is a kind of talisman crafted by writing letters and numbers, which are believed to have powers and effects, into square and rectangular shapes in certain mathematical equations. I studied at a university in Malaysia. I was away from my family, thousands of miles away. This started very early on when I moved there. Our campus was away from the city. As international students, we would be stretched thin for money to get to the main city, so most of my time was spent in my hostel room. One night, around 7 or 8, me and 2 friends were coming in a borrowed car when the car suddenly stopped. We got out to see what was wrong. As soon as we got out, the car started on its own. We thought it must be some mechanical issue. We didn't know shit, so we sat back in. The car stopped again. My friend kept turning the ignition, but it wouldn't budge. We decided to get out and push. Like I said, we didn't know anything, and the car felt like it was a cement block. The friend driving got out to help, and as soon as he stepped out, the car started again, with the hazards flashing and the lights on full beam. We started freaking out. None of us wanted to sit in it now. We waited until a few cars passed, flagged one down and asked the people to help us. Somehow we got to campus and just went to our rooms. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept feeling like something was in the room with me, moving with me, looking at me. I kept looking up suddenly to catch someone, but there wasn't anyone. In the morning, I asked the others, but they didn't experience anything. So I shrugged it off. Come night, I start feeling uneasy again. I play music in my room to wear it off, but it doesn't go. I shower, pray, and try to sleep, but it doesn't go. My bed was up against the wall, and I slept facing the wall. The whole night, I could feel someone standing behind me, looking at me, willing me to turn. This keeps going on for a few days, to the point I play a TV show in the background and would wake up after 5 or 6 episodes passed. I didn't play the Quran because I didn't want to wake up with a dream that would be disrespectful. The presence didn't go. Then, something happened. One night I'm struggling to sleep when I feel something or someone pulling my sheet away. I scramble to hold on, but my body is paralyzed. I can only blink my eyes. I lie there as the whole sheet is pulled off me. trying to recite something but unable to. Then, the whispering started, like multiple people whispering in slow, angry whispers. I couldn't make out anything. I wet the bed, and then lay there paralyzed for I don't know how long. My phone's azan alarm went off, and I could finally move. This became regular then. I would have episodes of paralysis and hear these whispers. My grades declined and I was exhausted. One evening I just picked up my stuff and went to sleep in my friend's room, who was almost always high. He looked up at me as I came in alone and went, "Who are the other guys?" There was no one. I called him a bloody stoner, rolled up and went to sleep. Next morning, I wake up for class and he's getting ready too, and he brings it up again. "Your new friends are weird. They just sat there all night beside you, looking at you. Didn't even respond to me." I just look at him, and it doesn't look like he's joking. I quietly take my classes and call my dad afterwards. He tells me to take one of those small ayat ul-kursis, some lines from the Quran, and stick it outside my door, so I do that. That's when the shit hits the fan. I don't want to change my room because it's a long process. I'm angry now because my space is being invaded. I have the ayat al-kursi, and I've lost my patience. That night I sleep soundly until there's a loud knock on my door. I'm still not sure if everything that happened after was real or if I was in a trance. I got up and opened the door, and there's a man standing there. I'm not sure if he was old. He's very tall, with his entire body covered in tattoos. He doesn't have eyes. I'm not sure what they were. He just points to the paper stuck above my door and makes this guttural sound that rocks my literal bones. He keeps pointing at it, with the weird scream coming from him. I don't know if anyone else heard it. It was a dream. What was it? I don't know. I just know I removed the paper and he came in. I remember waking up the next morning in my bed, angry at myself. I started finding these small things in my room. Dead birds, old bones of small animals, broken combs, sometimes burnt paper. I would just throw it out because now it was a fight with them. Then, one night, I decided to stop sleeping facing the wall. This is my room, my space, and I'm not letting them bully me anymore. I say loudly, "Do whatever you can, I'm not going anywhere else." Pray and go to sleep. I wake up in the middle of the night with all my room lights on, and I see the thing I will never forget. It's the same man offering namaz, a Muslim prayer called salah, in my room, in the wrong direction. He's doing all the same motions. I can hear the sounds, but he's facing the wrong way. I don't know how long I lay there, barely able to breathe and unable to scream, until the man, sitting there, turned around and stretched his arms towards me. They weren't arms. They were these long, black, snake-like things, looking like they could strangle me in a few seconds. In my heart, all this time I was reciting something. I could feel the tears on my pillow, and I lost all memory after that. I woke up in the morning with scratch marks all over my body, like a bunch of cats had been let loose on me. My bedsheet smelled like old blood. That was it for me. I couldn't go on like this anymore. So I contacted my cousin, who put me through to someone I could talk to. That night I decided to sleep in a mosque. It's common in Malaysia for guys to wear, I think he said dhoti, I'm not sure, over shorts if you are praying. I prayed, used mine as a sheet, and went to sleep in the mosque's courtyard. It's hard to believe the next part, but I'll leave it up to you. I woke up in the same exact place our car went bust that first night. I woke up to these strangers shaking me awake, asking me if I was okay. Someone suggesting calling the police. Some turned out to be my seniors, and I got a ride back to the hostel with them. After that, I started sleeping with different friends, until the scholar was put through to me. He came and spent a few hours in my room, and after asking around a bit, we learnt that the student before me who lived there used to practice black magic in the room. He even used to write with his blood on the walls, and the administration just painted a new coat on top of it. I don't know what happened to the room, or who got it. I was shifted to another one quietly, on the condition I wouldn't speak about it. And that's it. No more sleep paralysis, whispers, visits, scratches, waking up in new places, or smell of blood from me. I still have dreams about it, and I don't look in mirrors for too long. Hello watchers and listeners, thank you so much for watching. As always, a big thank you to all of the Reddit users who kindly allowed me to use their stories. If you want to help support this channel, you will find links to both my Patreon and my Teespring store in the description below, so feel free to have a look. And the biggest thank you to all of you who continue to support me. I truly do appreciate it. And remember,
Papa loves you.